personally, I am a huge Miller fan. I love Miller, but I also know that for those of you that are constantly asking for advice on what welder you should buy as, just a hobbyist, a weekend warrior, I know that you're not in the market to drop 4 or 5K on a really nice top-of-the-line Miller, ESAB, Lincoln, you name it. And I do think that the technology has come far enough that people who will never be reaching for those higher-end products now, more than ever, have access to machines and equipment that punches really far above its weight class. I think that a welding review video should be starting with welding. So here it is. First 1.5 inch of weld out of a brand new machine, and this is using the settings that are on the inside of the door. Pretty much all welders have a settings chart like this. And right out of the gate, super close. I just went through and I fine-tuned the weld settings all the way around, and at the last little bit here, it got pretty much exactly the way that I like it. When I'm welding 1/4 inch thick material, I like it to be ultra hot. And as you can see, there's a tiny bit of undercut, but this is really close to where I would like it. Honestly, the weld after this would probably have just a tiny bit more wire speed just to build it up to where it's nice and flat. But all these welds had good penetration. This is where the last weld was right there. And it's honestly, that's about as perfect as you could ask out of 030 wire. We are on the upper limits of what you should be welding with 030. This is 1/4 inch plate. And if we had 035 in the machine, it's going to be a lot closer to the operating range of the wire, whereas welding 1/4 inch with 030 is on the upper end of what you should be welding with. So now, what I want to do is I'm going to grab some 1/8 inch because that's going to be like right in the meat and potatoes of what this size wire is rated for. We'll weld that up and we'll see what the results are with that. If you're watching this video as someone who's new to MIG welding, what I highly suggest you do is go on Google or Bing, type in MIG welding wire size chart. Go to the images and you're going to find a bunch of different charts that are full of very important data that is going to help you maximize the capabilities of whatever machine it is that you have, especially when you're learning. Now, the better you get at welding, you can operate outside of these charts and you can really push the capabilities of the wire. But I think that it's really important to start a video where we're judging a machine by talking about how to maximize your skill to ensure that you are maximizing the capability of that machine and maximizing the quality of the welds that you're producing as a beginner. One thing that I have found is important with a MIG welder, with all the different cheap machines that I've owned and then the really nice one that I have, is the wire feed mechanism itself. This is really nice. This is actually super similar to the Miller's wire feed mechanism as far as the way it's designed. My first welder was always a pain. You would turn it on, it would weld, but out of nowhere it would kink. And especially when you start going with thinner wire size, like this is some .025. And the reason I'm putting 0.25 in there is I just want to see how it welds through this machine, and I want to see if it kinks, because that was a big problem I had with one of my earlier cheap machines that I owned. Now, what I've also noticed is that the mechanisms that are like toolless, I mean, I am holding a tool here, but I don't need like a ratchet or a screwdriver or anything in order to nip the wire, pull it out, and then feed new wire in here. And this is a toolless feeding mechanism, which usually correlates, in my experience, with a machine that doesn't kink very easily. I really like the design of this, and I mean, we're going to test to see if it kinks with thinner wire, but just by looking at it right out of the box, there's no big gaps and big spaces, and I think that that's going to allow it to feed nice and smooth with no issues. Circle back on how this welder performed with 1/8 inch. But what I'd like to do, and what I know a lot of you want to see, I'm going to turn this machine all the way up and I'm going to try to burn in some 1/2 inch plate and not do it on the table, but do it on a real world project. Yikes. This machine does not like filling in a gap on 1/2-inch plate, which it's not designed to do, but I made it work. The machine was not happy. So just for comparison's sake, this machine is rated at 3/8 plate. So is my Miller Multimatic AC/DC. Now, of course, it's a much more expensive machine, but what do you get for your money? Let's see how it takes on the 1/2-inch plate, considering the fact that it's got the exact same brand, exact same size wire going through an extension cord, and it's going to be welding on the exact same size plate. As you can see, this machine is burning this in smooth, or at least smooth enough, and it gives me the ability to do this pass all in one shot with the machine set to absolute max. This is a pretty long pass to do at max on any machine, but the Miller does it no sweat. Pressure shows cracks. I like testing equipment like this because I like to see how far you can push it before you start to see like diminishing returns, I guess. Whether it's tires or it's welders or it's hammers, I like to see what they're capable of. And when you push things outside of what they're designed to do, like weld 1/2-inch steel, how are they going to perform in those conditions? Now with the Harbor Freight welder, it did amazing with 1/8-inch steel, which is the most common size for everything, whether it's frame repair on a truck or it's two bumpers, sliders, roll cage. 1/8-inch is a very common size, and it didn't matter what size wire I used, 0.025, 0.030, and 0.035. I just read the chart on the side, I adjusted my settings, and I was able to recreate identical welds between each wire size. I think that is a huge win for this machine in terms of how they set up this chart and the settings and its consistency throughout these different wire sizes. However, we discovered that when we turn this thing all the way up, we max our settings out, it is very, very unhappy. And just as a control, we threw the Miller at it, and the Miller had no problems. And they're both rated at the exact same material thickness. If you look at the charts on the side of the machine, when you turn them all the way up, it's rated for 3/8. We welded 1/2-inch, which is above and beyond what they're designed to do. However, it doesn't know it's 1/2-inch. We're welding, how do I put this simply? We are pushing the machines beyond what they're designed to do as far as the material thickness, but the welder should still weld smoothly when the settings are turned all the way up. And what we discovered with this Harbor Freight machine is it didn't want to weld smoothly. All we're doing is turning the machine all the way up and filling a valley that I had already created on this truss. Now, we were able to weld it, but the machine was super unhappy about it. It was really inconsistent, and both machines were ran through the exact same extension cord. Both machines were using the exact same brand 0.035 wire, but the Miller, being a high-end, very proven brand, had no problem at max settings and getting a really nice smooth weld, even though we were welding material that is thicker than what it's designed to do. Now what I want to do, because this couldn't have piqued my curiosity more, I'm going to chop up some 1/4-inch plate, I'm going to chop up some 3/8-inch plate, and I want to slowly turn this machine all the way up to max settings and see where this Mason-Dixon line is of being unhappy with me because I've got it turned up too high. One aspect of purchasing a new welder, whether it's on Amazon or it's Harbor Freight or it's at a welding supply, that I think is very much overlooked is where do you get your consumable parts? Where do you get your replacement parts? Are they common sizes with the machine that you're buying? Because I have bought a machine before at a Northern Tool that I had a difficult time sourcing the different things that I needed for the welder, and that made it a little bit less fun to use, and I had to plan ahead. What's really nice is if you can find a welder where you can just walk into a store and buy the replacement parts, and that's why I'm at Harbor Freight. I wanted to see, do they have more nozzles? Do they have more tips? Are there any other replacement parts? And I was pleasantly surprised that they even had like the liner for the MIG torch. So if you have an issue with the liner, you can just go and buy it right off the shelf. So that's pretty impressive. I didn't see much else besides that, but I did see like some TIG stuff that was very surprising. So Harbor Freight has really stepped up their game since my friend Spencer and I bought a Harbor Freight welder like 15 or 18 years ago, whenever it was, with our 25% off coupon. I think that the fact that 7 days a week you can go in and you can buy a nozzle, or you could buy tips, or you could buy wire, that makes these Harbor Freight welders pretty appealing. Very few welding shops that you could go in on a Sunday and buy replacement parts. Now, very few people also work on Sundays, right? So it depends on whether you're a hobbyist or you're a professional, and that's going to help dictate whether or not you're looking at a Miller or a Harbor Freight welder. In any case, no matter what welder you commit to and you buy, make sure you have a good source of replacement parts, and hopefully there is some sort of a track record that you can follow that shows that these companies that you're purchasing from are willing to replace or repair your unit if you have an issue. I started with 3/16. It laid down perfect. It crackled and sounded exactly like it should. Plenty of penetration. You can see plenty of heat in there. It blued up the top of this piece. 3/16, money. 1/4 inch, not bad. It did a good job on 1/4 inch, but then when I started to slowly turn up the heat, I just wanted to turn it up close to the 3/8 settings and burn it in on 1/4 inch. And once it gets towards the top of the 1/4 inch range and into the 3/8 range, it becomes really difficult to run a bead because it's just popping and it just does not sound great. Then of course, once we go to 3/8, it's the same kind of thing. I have to turn down the machine into this range, like right here. So this is like, you can see there's a scale there. It's towards the top of the 1/4 inch range. So I have to turn it down off of 3/8 and down to 1/4 inch. Then it'll burn. I mean, it's doing what it's supposed to do, but as you can see, the weld's a little tall. I mean, that's not ideal at all. So this was the last weld that I did with the Vulcan, and then this, I'm a little embarrassed how messy it is, but as you can see, it's a good weld. And this is what I did with the Miller. Have the Miller turned, up to 3/8, but that range is clearly, it's too much for that machine. And it makes it to where I can't weld anything more than 1/4 inch. Now, that said, I still think that is a material thickness that's going to be very accessible to a lot of people, anything under 1/4 inch. But it is a bummer that I can't get any good welds on 3/8 or bigger. Something that I want to bring up that I think is pretty cool about this Vulcan welder is the pre and post flow. This is not something that I've ever seen on a MIG welder personally, and it's something that I've always thought would be kind of neat. That said, I've welded with many machines that don't have this feature without any issues, but I do like the fact that it gets a little shot of the gas before you start your welding process, and it gives you a little bit of the gas after you're done, just to protect everything as it cools for a second. I kind of dig that. Something else that I think is worth mentioning is the runtime of the fan. Whenever I turn on this Vulcan machine, the fan is running all the time, which Maybe if you're in a super hot climate, that might actually be a benefit. But where I live, you don't need the fan to run all the time. And in fact, it makes the machine get dirty super fast because it's constantly cycling in dirty air from your shop with all those little like metal like bits and shavings and stuff that are floating through the air. All that metal dust gets into your equipment and gets on everything. And I imagine that that's going to shorten the life of the welder if you're not on top of that. I have had an issue with a previous welder where I had to blow it out every few months. Otherwise, it would literally just completely shut off. And then I would blow it out, blow all the metal dust out, turn it back on, and it would work just fine. So the stuff is definitely bad on your equipment. So I do like that the Miller only kicks on the fan whenever you're welding and then for a few seconds afterwards instead of running 24/7 because you're out in your shop for the full weekend and you've got your machine running the entire time. What's the next welder that you want to see me test in here? Because this welder is going to end up, one of you are going to own it. If you need a welder, I'm going to be giving this away at some point. I want to run like 30 or 40 pounds of wire through it, maybe over the next 6 months or so. And then I'm going to give it away. I'm going to get another piece of gear that's around the same price range. We'll test it. I want to do this a couple times until I ultimately end with a Miller. I'm a huge Miller fanboy. This Miller Multimatic that I have is the best welder I've ever used. It is great at everything, genuinely. I can give it to someone with very little welding experience and they can just lay down great looking beads because the settings are so easy to get dialed in so fast that it's great at everything. So that said, before I end up my secondary machine being a Miller anyway, I'd like to test a few of these more mid-level welders and share it with you guys because I'm getting asked nonstop what I think about this welder or that welder. So let me know in the comments which piece of gear you want to see me test next. And maybe by summertime, we'll replace this one. I'll give this away to one of you who needs a welder, and we'll put another one in its place, and we'll do the exact same thing. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're a Vulcan owner and yours is doing the same thing, or if it's not doing the same thing, let us know in the comments. I had a Northern Tool welder that had the exact same issue where I couldn't turn it up all the way without it just blasting so much wire that it couldn't keep up. So I don't think that this is a fluke. I don't think this is like a factory defect. I think this is just how these welders are. But I do want to know if that's the case. So if you're a Vulcan owner, let us know in the comments so we all know moving forward if this is common or not. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.